So we're live talking about movies, and if you want to join us, we'll be doing this every single week, hopefully Mondays, and discussing movies in Backlog and Chill, because that's how we roll. Yeah. So we're going to discuss movies in our backlog, maybe in your backlog if you have something you want to suggest and discuss. This week's movie was something in my backlog that I'd been wanting to see for a long time, and someone suggested it to me by piquing my interest with a crazy fan theory that we'll be talking about. But the movie is Snowpiercer with Chris Evans. Yeah. And so what did you think about it, Kevin?
I was very confused at the beginning of the movie, which is fine because they needed to set up a world. I had just as many questions at the end of the movie as I did at the beginning. There were different questions, but it was kind of disjointed, but it was an interesting ride.
Mm-hmm. I didn't have questions. I had some questions at the end, but I figured out a lot of them. But then I had questions trying to piece together the fan theory. First of all, if for those of you who didn't know, this is based on a graphic novel, Le Trans Personnage, yes, which the director Bong Joon-ho apparently was at a bookstore in France, in Paris, saw this and read through all of the entire series, standing there in the bookstore.
That is awesome.
Yeah, he just fell in love with it and wanted to make it. So Bong Joon-ho did The Host, if you haven't seen that, and a lot of other movies. This was his first movie in English. I think he did a pretty darn good job. So I guess we can run down the quickly, like the premise of Snowpiercer. We're talking post-apocalyptic fun, where essentially global warming was going to happen, and what they were going to plan to stop global warming was going to freeze the Earth. So the creator of the train, this impossible eternal train, he created a train and put a bunch of people on it in order to try to save humanity.
Right. It's basically kind of like the Doomsday Shuttle type of thing. It's like, yes, everybody else is going to die, but this train's going to be okay.
Yeah, the train's going to be okay, and somehow it is. And we start the movie. It's been going on 17 years.
Correct.
Which Whitney got confused at one point because they have a birthday during the movie, which I thought was funny. Everyone celebrates, and then they're now referring to it as 18 years. And she was like, "Wait a second, I thought it was 17." I'm like, I forgot about the celebration. But you start 17 years into it, so some of the people on the train have never been off of the train. The children have never been off the train. Some of the people who are in their 20s may not even remember what it was like not being on the train. Chris Evans' character becomes a de facto leader in staging a coup and trying to overthrow Ed Harris, the evil dictator, if you will, on the train, overthrow his thralls.
Yeah, and so that's kind of the basic setup, and like we start out with Chris Evans at the back of the train, and he says the only way to really like get this revolution and make it stick is to reach the engine. Like that's the all important goal, which is obviously the front of the train. And so it's very much a video game setup. So after this, we're gonna be talking like full spoilers and everything. So yeah, go watch it and then come back.
Yeah, if you haven't watched already, stop it now and go back. First of all, as one of the big questions that happens is how do you eat in a place like this? Now
there's
later
a
on,
couple of options. None of them are great.
None of them are great, and I do love that Chris Evans like breaking down at towards the end of the movie and discussing how they resorted to cannibalism when they first were on the train, and he was one of them that was resorting to cannibalism. I mean, anybody who lived had to do that. There's no other way, because that was before the protein bars, and the protein bars that popped out were just completely disgusting before you found out that they're made of cockroaches.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, if those cockroaches are being farmed in a clean environment, There's nothing wrong with insect meat. It's disgusting to think about. I'm just saying.
I'm not gonna. It's not gonna be my first choice.
I'm just saying. It's a lot better than the alternative. I'd rather eat a protein bar made of cockroaches than that because it's definitely not a first choice. But yeah, I'd rather do that than eat people. But towards the front of the train, they have.
What was the high point of the movie for you? Like high points and low points. What was the best part and worst part of the movie for you? Because I have my worst part.
Other than the ending.
Okay.
The best part was the all-out fight between the guards and the people in the back of the train, and how it just kept going and escalating. Yeah, with the axes, and then it goes dark, and then it just kept getting worse and worse. Between that and the teacher scene was probably my favorite scene in the entire.
It was awesome.
It was wonderful, and we got almost an introduction of the dab because this is before dabbing. But I swear those kids and Allison Pill were dabbing in this. When it came to worst parts, I didn't have a part that I disliked other than some pacing issues. I didn't think they needed to stop and eat sushi.
That was a bit odd.
But what was your favorite part and least favorite part?
I think my favorite part. Well, I mean, I can't have yours, but so I'm gonna go ahead and dive a little deeper into the school area, and it was interesting how it showed a society that is based on a hierarchy, and it's explaining to the people in the middle that the people down below them, or in this case further back from them, they're fine people, but they're not. They don't need to be up here. They're where they're supposed to be.
Yep.
And just kind of the idea that because this is the way things are, this is how things should be, and that's something that's been used in a lot of situations because there's a lot of commentary.
I agree. I should have brought a shoe to put on my head during this because I thought that was just hilarious.
And that's also it showed a lot of elements of not only government but also religion and power and how those structures come to be. And so my least favorite part was when they were doing the shootout between the cars, because both of those cars are going to freeze and nobody's going to hit anybody because you can't. So yeah, that was it was just a logistics and suspension of disbelief. But
sure.
I really enjoyed. You're talking about pacing, and I don't know exactly where I would put this, but the pace at which the world was revealed, because there's several lines toward the beginning of the movie that only make sense at the end, like when Chris Evans, Curtis in the movie, when Cap's talking about how he doesn't think that he can be a leader with both arms.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make sense at the time, but as you go further through the movie, you find out, okay, this is it's also something that makes him not only more human but more vulnerable. And
I agree.
But they didn't feel the need to rush in and immediately explain it, which also sets, again, for me, like I had a lot of questions at the beginning, but because they went out of their way to have things, okay, clearly I'm not supposed to understand this yet. That allowed me to relax, and then I could take the information as it came.
Yeah. See, I appreciated that. I felt like they weren't talking down to me. They knew, if he shows a scar, you're going to remember that he had a scar.
Yeah.
And then later on, when he talks about the story about cutting off arms, you're like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. Did he try that? And sure enough, he did.
Yeah.
No, I appreciated that. I thought that it added a lot to the way that they were doing the story. The reveal at the end was one of my favorite parts for a few reasons. Essentially, the engine is eternal, except that a part went extinct. I don't know if you caught that. He said a part went extinct, so we had to replace it. Well, there's only one thing that could do the job, which was children. Essentially, pulling out gunk from the engine to make sure that the engine kept going. Because if they didn't have children do that, the engine would seize up and they would stop moving.
Yeah. Well, it was also the proposal that's put to him by Ed Harris at the end. Wilford, I know it
Yeah,
started.
Wilford.
Yeah, Wilford. The idea of, okay, you can be a good leader because you've seen everything from the very bottom to the very top, and you can make this work. And I liked the fact that Wilford's and I guess Gilliam's as well, like their philosophy was that these are the sacrifices that are needed to maintain the species.
Sure.
And that's something, that's an argument that is I think the term slippery slope is overused in general, but in this case it very much shows where that can lead to.
It's a definite slippery slope, but he had a great point. He's the only person who had been from the back of the train to the front of the train.
Yeah.
I'd argue that maybe Wilfred did that early on before the train had started moving, but definitely in the last 18 years he had not been. I don't think he'd been towards the middle.
Well,
I think
he said that he had never been to the back because there's nothing mechanical about that. His emphasis was the engine, and
was
so
the engine. That's all that mattered. Yeah.
Right.
So
I can believe that he never went back. And also,
I agree.
Tilda Swinton was spectacular. Like she was truly amazing in that role.
I can't think of a bad role that she's been in. She gives it all every single movie. So are you ready for me to blow your mind?
Yes, please do. And you mentioned a fan theory. Is this that thing?
This is the fan theory.
Okay,
because
cool.
the fan theory is that this movie is a sequel
Go on.
to Willy Wonka. And that Wilfred is Charlie Bucket.
Yes.
Sorry, I actually accidentally put the wrong name on here as I'm showing the names here. Charlie Bucket is Wilfred.
Yeah.
Tilda Swinton's character is Veruca Salt.
All right.
And sorry, my text is screwed up here. But Charlie's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, he took over, and now he runs the train because this is after the apocalypse, if you will. Tilda Swinton is Veruca Salt. Not only is she British, but she is crazy posh. She always has to enter first if you watch all of her scenes, just like she demands in Willy Wonka and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And the shooter who has the shootout with Chris Evans' character is Mike TV.
Who was that character in Willy Wonka?
Mike TV was the kid with the cowboy hat, and he watched TV and went bang, bang, bang. He's obsessed with guns. And the engine's part that went extinct. No, was Oompa Loompas.
Oh.
The part went extinct.
Holy
Oompa Loompas
cow.
went
Okay.
extinct.
Yeah.
They're tiny, and he's like, oh, Oompa Loompas aren't a thing anymore because maybe there weren't any female Oompa Loompas. Maybe he didn't think that through. And then he needed something to do what the Oompa Loompas did, because the Oompa Loompas drove all of the machinery in the chocolate factory, and they drove the train.
Yeah.
And no longer.
That was really fun, and I think this will probably be a movie that I will watch again because, like the big reveal at the end wasn't like too. There were like stages of reveal. There are various things that are revealed toward the end of the movie.
Sure.
But like, I think it'll be interesting to go back and watch the character of Curtis, knowing what we know about him by the end of the movie, and seeing like the decisions he makes, particularly regarding Edgar as second in command.
Yeah, and I mean, Edgar was definitely a person to watch. Also, John Hurt's character, which I forgot his name.
Yes, Gilliam.
Gilliam, watching Gilliam and the reveal that Gilliam was in on it the whole time.
Yeah.
Which was Slugworth, by the way, from Wonka.
Right.
Slugworth was the person who they were like, oh, he's from a rival candy company, and he wasn't that at all. Wonka hired him.
Right.
So he was in on it the whole time. So watching him throughout that would also be interesting to do, which I definitely would like to do. And you have some interesting actors and actresses that pop up in here. I mean, Octavia Spencer is in here doing a fantastic job. When they're trying to find the kids, she was it was pretty heart-wrenching watching her reaction to the kids in the classroom. Was pretty crazy too. There were a lot of scenes that I absolutely love. Tilda Swinton's first scene in the movie, maybe another one of my favorites, but her getting upset about only having a certain amount of time to talk, and then not having enough time, not using up all the time, so then she plays a little bit of the TV to fill up time. But it was just amazing. The entitlement out of that character was just insane. I mean, obviously you have. Mm-hmm.
It was also interesting to see how quickly someone will switch from preservation of the system to self-preservation.
Yeah.
When it's no longer fitting them. It's and I'm not going to go too deep into commentary on like real world political commentary on this, but when the system that has always worked for those in power is suddenly challenged, they're against it until it's applied to them. And
Correct.
that's something that you see consistently throughout. But then you also have people who are slavishly dedicated to the system at all costs because it's all they have. Like they have willingly become a cog in the great machine that they believe is going to make everything okay. And it's interesting what kind of things can be rationalized. I think that the best post-apocalyptic movies, games, books, whatever it is, the best stories in those scenarios are not necessarily about the trauma or the devastation itself. It's like The Walking Dead in its various iterations is at its best when it is focused on the humans and what people do to survive and what kind of dynamics are put forward when the social contract is lifted. And in this case, the social contract is strictly mandated. And that's something that was really interesting to see.
I think that there's a lot of things we could dive into the parallels of how this caste system in the train is powered by child labor. So you could talk about like the turn of the century industrial revolution was on the backs of children and less fortunate. So there's a lot of that kind of parallel going on. There's a lot of interesting stuff in the movie. I really liked the usage of the drug, the cron drug that they were. And they basically said early on it's flammable. And it's essentially radioactive waste or something like it's industrial waste, and you think that the guy who designed the door systems is a junkie. And it turns out he's hoarding all of that, all of the stuff, so he can create a bomb. Didn't expect that. Did not expect that at all. So I thought that was interesting. I also thought it was interesting. They never went into was his friend. Was that his daughter? I don't know who it was.
They said daughter.
Okay, I messed that part, I guess. Was she psychic or is she just really tripping? Because I think she's just tripping. That's what I think.
Can it be both?
Because she was like she was all about this is behind this door, whatever. And as soon as she's put on the spot where she's like, hey, is something back? Can you see through the doors? She's like, don't open that door. And I think that would be anybody's reaction if you were trying to fake. You're like, oh, I need to be really dramatic now. And she did. She was dramatic. And it just happened to be the moment that the guards were there, which I also liked. Again, another moment in the movie that they're not dumbing it down for you. They're talking about, these are the guards' sleeping quarters. They just left in a hurry. What the heck's going on? I was like, where are they? Well, they they saw the coup was happening, so they went to arm themselves, which is crazy. Really well done movie. So what should we do for our next movie in our backlog? Do you have a suggestion?
I do.
Okay.
And it's okay for those of you who are watching this. For those of you who have talked to Patrick for any length of time or listened to him talk about movies, you know that it's going to be tricky for me to find movies that he has not watched. However, I think I've got it.
Okay.
The next movie I want to do, The Naked Lunch.
The Naked Lunch. Who is in that?
Yes. Nobody.
Okay.
I will give this real briefly, and then you go watch it. It is kind of difficult to find, but it's based on a movie, or I'm sorry, it's based on a book. By
It's Peter Weller. Peter Weller, and
Peter
Judy
Weller.
Davis, Ian Holm. Okay.
Okay, so there are a few people.
Roy Schneider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very bizarre movie, and it's really entertaining, and it's like nothing you've ever seen. So
Sounds good. So that's next up. So watch that if you haven't seen it already. If you have seen it, give it a rewatch and join us next time.
And the director, Cronenberg.
Ooh, this could be
there you
interesting.
go. See you next
This could be
time.
interesting. Later.
Thanks for watching This Week in Our Collective Heads. Subscribe over here and click the bell, and that way you'll know about any new videos that we put up, because we put up a lot of gameplay, a lot of stories from games and stuff like that, and gameplay is down here.
Yeah, and you got more editorials and news stuff down here. Check it out.